Welcome to Shadows at Dusk. Dusk is not the end. It's the doorway between two worlds. A place where stories slip through, quiet, cold, and true. You've entered that space now, and what follows is meant for you. Stay in the shadow. The initial impact resonated at 17 minutes past 3 in the morning. Precision confirmed by the glow of my phone, accompanied by a silent curse for whatever soul dared shatter the pre-dawn quietude. Residing atop Sovereign Heights in the penthouse solitude of 1201 was meant to guarantee tranquility, a privilege for which I paid dearly. Yet the ponderous tread continued overhead, each footfall a seismic tremor through my plaster ceiling. I lay supine, gaze lost in the textured white expanse above, charting the phantom progress. The steps traversed the space corresponding to the living area, then shifted deliberately toward the presumed bedroom of 1301. Slow, heavy. The cadence suggested work boots meeting floorboards with grim intent. 15 minutes of this relentless pacing frayed my nerves. Shrugging into my robe, I made for the lift. The night manager needed informing. 3 years I'd lived here. Imperfections were expected, but this violation of nocturnal peace was intolerable. Dim light suffused the lobby, bathing Silas, the elderly night manager, in a soft glow as he hunched over a crossword. He peered up at my approach, reading spectacles perched precariously on his nose. "Mr. Thorne, burning the midnight oil, are we?" His pen rested. "Someone's taken up residence in 1301 unannounced. They're up there marching about like they're shod in lead." Silas's thick eyebrows knitted. 1301? Impossible, sir. Impossible or not, someone is undeniably present. The sound is perfectly clear. Silas removed his glasses, polishing them absently on his shirt hem. "Mr. Thorne, 1301 has stood vacant since Mrs. Albright departed in June. It's undergoing refurbishment." Padlocked shut. A sudden dryness claimed my mouth. Then whose steps echo from up there? Building settling, most likely. These old towers groan and sigh through the night. I shook my head firmly. "No, Silas. These are footfalls. Heavy. Methodical. Like pacing." With a weary sigh, he produced a ring of keys. "Right then. Let's have a look, shall we? Set your mind at ease." The elevator's ascent to the 13th floor seemed unnaturally prolonged. Doors slid open onto a corridor swallowed by shadows, punctuated only by the faint gleam of emergency lighting. Our own steps echoed unnervingly on the marble as we neared 1301. As Silas had stated, a substantial padlock secured the door. He turned the key, flicked on a powerful torch, and we crossed the threshold. Utter emptiness greeted us. Dust sheets draped the floors like shrouds. Walls stood partially stripped to raw drywall. Cans of paint and tools lay scattered. The air hung thick with the scent of plaster and desertion. Room by room, we searched. No breach, no disturbance in the settled dust. Windows sealed tight. "Satisfied?" Silas inquired. I nodded, a flush of foolishness warming my neck. Yet the moment I returned to the sanctuary of my own apartment, the pacing resumed overhead. That was 3 weeks past. The footfalls have become a fixture of the night. They commence around 3, heralded by that first distinct impact, followed by roughly an hour of relentless back and forth pacing. Occasionally, The presence halts directly above my bed, a palpable weight pressing down, imagined or otherwise, through the ceiling structure. Twice I summoned the police. Their investigations yielded nothing. Building management dispatched crews, roofers, HVAC technicians, electricians. None could account for the phenomenon. My phone recordings capture only distorted static, low rumbles devoid of discernible steps. Last night, the fragile tether of my composure snapped. At 3:15 a.m., I sat bolt upright in bed, expectant. The initial thud arrived, punctual as a death knell. I dressed, retrieved my toolbox from the closet. Silence reigned in the building, save for the low hum of climate control as I ascended the emergency stairwell to the 13th floor. The padlock remained undisturbed. A glance down the deserted corridor, then the drill whirred to life. Replacing the lock was a trivial concern. Seeing for myself had become paramount. The door groaned inward. I stepped inside, my flashlight beam slicing the Stygian gloom. Impossibly, the footsteps continued above me, but I was on the top floor. This was the source. I moved through the vacant rooms, probing every corner, every closet. The tread seemed to perpetually precede me, always retreating into the next space. My flashlight beam flickered erratically. A distinct chill permeated the air. Within the master bedroom, a new discovery, a solitary work boot impression starkly defined in the dust. It hadn't been there during the inspection with Silas. As my gaze fixed upon it, another footstep sounded directly behind me. I whirled, flashlight beam catching a fleeting movement, a trick of shadow, yet the atmosphere felt thick, was occupied, intensely watchful. I backed away, slammed the door shut, and fled down the stairs, not stopping until I was inside my own unit, every light blazing, my back hard against the wall. Above, the footfalls resumed their measured march. This morning, I contacted a real estate agent. Breaking the lease, forfeiting the deposit, these mattered little now. But her parting words chilled my blood to ice. A construction accident marred the tower's completion in the 1980s. During the final stages, a worker vanished without a trace. Days of searching the structure proved fruitless. He was never found. I composed this from a hotel room across the city. My neighbors likely deem me unhinged. Management threatens eviction should I breach a 1301 again. But I am certain of what I heard, what I glimpsed. The complication is, sets I must return. Essential documents reside in my apartment safe, critical for my work. I'll go during daylight, surely a safe endeavor. The haunting adheres strictly to nocturnal hours. Yet seated here, I cannot dispel the conviction that upon my return, something awaits. Not within 1301, but within my own apartment. Because last night, moments before I fled, I heard a new, horrifying sound. The footsteps had begun their descent down the walls. A private investigator is now delving into the building's shadowed history. He's unearthed pertinent details concerning the vanished construction worker, Hector Vance, aged 42, working overtime, alone on the upper levels when he disappeared. His tools were discovered strewn across the area destined to become the 13th floor, yet no sign of the man himself. The investigator also uncovered a fact management conveniently omitted. In the last decade, 3 previous occupants of 1201 abruptly terminated their leases. All cited inexplicable noises emanating from above. Tomorrow, I meet with a structural engineer. Perhaps a rational explanation exists, an architectural anomaly, a resonance quirk amplifying mundane sounds. But that fails to account for the boot print, the fleeting shadow in the oppressive dark. For now, the hotel remains my refuge. My clothes retain the faint, cloying scent of 1301's dust. Each time I close my eyes, the image surfaces, that single print, stark in the flashlight's glare. And sometimes, in the hushed hours preceding dawn, miles from sovereign heights, I swear I still perceive the distant echo of those steps. The true horror isn't the footfalls themselves, not the pockets of unnatural cold, the peripheral flickers of movement, nor even the pervasive sense of being observed. It is the certainty, crystallizing with each passing day. Whatever entity paces the confines of 1301 is aware of my awareness, and it anticipates my return. I've begun meticulous documentation, dates, times, the precise patterns of the tread, correlating temperature fluctuations. I analyze the distortions in my recordings, searching for meaning within the static. If I can decipher the pattern, perhaps I can comprehend its intent. The investigator called again, more on Hector Vance. He'd been pulling double shifts for weeks, desperate to amass funds for his daughter's education. The night he vanished, he was installing fixtures in the nascent 1301. His toolbox lay beside an open utility shaft. A shaft subsequently searched exhaustively. His body remained unrecovered. Tomorrow necessitates my return to the apartment. My employer's patience wears thin. The documents are non-negotiable. I've arranged for the investigator to accompany me. Noon, precisely. The building will teem with life, sunlight hopefully streaming through the windows. I have committed the structural layouts of both floors to memory, mapped every conceivable exit. A thermal camera, borrowed from a friend in home inspections, is part of my arsenal. Yet as I pack my bag for this excursion, an uncontrollable tremor afflicts my hands. Because I possess knowledge I lacked before, knowledge that casts this entire ordeal in a far more sinister light. I consulted the original building plans at City Hall. According to those blueprints, a 13th floor was designated purely for maintenance and utilities. But during the construction phase, it was sealed off, abandoned. The 13th floor that currently exists, the one housing apartment 1301, was never part of the intended design. It simply should not be there. The investigator and I enter tomorrow at exactly 7 minutes past midday, peak sun coinciding with the maintenance crew's lunch interval. 30 minutes allotted, retrieve my necessities, one final survey of 1301. I have chronicled everything. All I know, all I've witnessed, all I've heard. Should events transpire poorly tomorrow, a record will remain. Someone might grasp the truth of what walks above apartment 1201. But tonight, ensconced in this sterile hotel room, my thoughts circle relentlessly back to that imprint in the dust. A size 12 work boot, Hector Vance's size, according to his missing person file, and it faced the wall, not a door, not the windows, as if its maker had simply passed through solid concrete. Tomorrow marks my final visit to Sovereign Heights. Thereafter, the building may keep its spectral secrets. Let another tenant strain to hear the pacing overhead. Let another puzzle over the anomaly of a floor that defies its own blueprints, because the footsteps are no longer confined to the apartment above or the walls between. Last night, for the first time, they echoed in my dreams, and they were drawing nearer. That forgotten bureau drawer yielded its secret on a Saturday evening steeped in the airless scent of neglect. I'd returned to the ancestral home, a place steeped in silence and shadowed memories, tasked with sifting through the accumulated detritus of lives lived and ended. Dust motes danced in the weak light, filtering through grimy panes. Expecting only emptiness, perhaps brittle, forgotten papers, my fingers closed instead around something small, leather-bound. Unadorned, save for the map of faint scratches marring its cover, the notebook offered no name, no clue to its provenance. Its pages, when riffled through, were utterly blank, virginal, a curiosity, nothing more. I tossed it onto the scarred kitchen table, intending it for idle jottings, a receptacle for stray thoughts. No premonition stirred. The ordinary fabric of the moment remained intact. That intention, however, proved tragically short-lived. Later, cocooned in the living room's quiet gloom, punctuated only by the refrigerator's steady drone, an aberrant skittering sound prickled the silence. From the kitchen, I rose, investigating. Nothing seemed amiss, the familiar tableau undisturbed but for the notebook. It lay where I'd left it, yet its cover gaped slightly, a silent invitation. A brush of my hand across the leather sent a shock through my fingertips. It was cold, unnaturally so, as if plucked from winter frost. Lifting it, my eye caught a whisper-thin line on the first leaf, graphite gray against the cream paper. A smudge, perhaps? An artifact of its long confinement? I hadn't written it. Closing the volume, dismissing the anomaly, I returned it to the table and retreated upstairs to the familiar discomfort of my old bedroom. No fear yet, merely a flicker of the peculiar. Midnight tolled internally, marked by a muffled concussion from below. My heart lapped against my ribs. The antique mattress springs groaned beneath me as I sat up, convinced something had tumbled from a countertop. Rubbing sleep from my eyes, I descended the creaking stairs, each step amplifying the unease coiling in my gut. The sight that greeted me tightened that coil. The notebook lay sprawled on the floorboards, a yard or so from the table's edge. Its cover yawned wide, exposing the first page, now violated by script. Jagged, dark, uneven letters formed words. I retrieved it, a tremor starting in my hand, my stomach clenching. I watch in the dark. Just that. The medium, ink, or something else entirely, seemed unnervingly fresh, barely dry. Logic offered no solace. I was alone, utterly alone. The urge to hurl it into the bin warred with the burgeoning, morbid curiosity. What unseen hand guided this? I snapped the cover shut, pressing down firmly, my breath catching. My hands shook faintly. I forced slow, measured breaths. Back onto the table it went, an object of intense, unwilling focus. The fine hairs on my nape prickled, the distinct, visceral sensation of being observed. A swift turn revealed only the empty kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator, the sole sound in the waiting stillness. No footfalls, no fleeting shadows. Defeated, leaving the downstairs lights blazing defiance against the dark, I climbed back to the dubious sanctuary of the upper floor. Sleep offered no refuge. Each time my eyelids drifted shut, a phantom scratching intruded, the ghost of graphite on paper. I jerk awake, scanning the oppressive darkness, hearing only the frantic rhythm of my own pulse. A tightness constricted my chest, imagination populating the corners with crouched, unseen things. Once, the distinct creak of the bedroom door easing open sent me fumbling for the lamp switch. Illumination revealed the door steadfastly shut. After long stretches of brittle quiet, exhaustion finally claimed me. Dawn found me slick with cold sweat. Downstairs, the notebook rested on the table, closed, deceptively inert. I opened it, bracing myself, blank. The page where the ominous sentence had resided was smooth, immaculate. My fingers traced the empty space, finding no residue, no indentation, no hint of the previous night's violation. Vertigo threatened. Had I dreamt it? A wakened nightmare conjured by fatigue and the oppressive atmosphere? Seeking clarity, I shoved the notebook into a drawer and escaped into the morning air, desperate for the mundane. That afternoon, the house stirred again. Faint creaks emanated from the vicinity of the living room closet, like pressure applied from within. I flung the door open. Only coats and stacked boxes greeted me. Moments later, a sharp slam echoed from the hallway. I hurried towards the sound. The window I deliberately left open to banish the stale air was shut tight, the latch secured. Outside, the day was still, windless. My muscles tensed, the familiar constriction returning to my chest. The conviction of not being alone solidified, becoming a near certainty. My gaze darted nervously, probing shadows, expecting something. But each room remained stubbornly empty, the floorboards silent beneath my cautious tread. As evening shadows lengthened, drawing out the familiar shapes of furniture into grotesque forms, I felt compelled to confront the notebook again. Settling in the living room under the hesitant glow of a table lamp, the overhead fixture had developed an intermittent flicker that frayed my nerves further. I retrieved the volume from its drawer. The instant my skin met the leather, I knew something had changed. The pages felt thicker, imbued with a subtle texture they hadn't possessed before. Flipping through, my breath hitched. Scattered across random leaves were new intrusions, cryptic symbols, fragments of script in an unfamiliar angular hand, stark black lines that resolved themselves into unsettling shapes, eyes perhaps, lidless and watching. The fine hairs on my arms lifted, my mouth turned to dust. A low groan resonated from the ceiling above, the sound of ancient timbers settling or something else shifting. I snapped the notebook shut, unable to bear the sight any longer. An hour, maybe more, bled away in tense silence before a clatter erupted from the kitchen. I found a cabinet door hanging open, its contents disturbed. Several plates lay scattered on the linoleum, miraculously unbroken. Cups had rolled into corners. Taking an involuntary step back, my hand clamped onto the counter edge, knuckles white. And there it was. The notebook sat squarely on the countertop, though I'd left it unequivocally in the living room. No memory of moving it surfaced. Breathing became a conscious effort as my chest cavity shrinking. I picked it up, dread a cold weight within me, and opened it once more. A terse command stared back, "Come to the stairs." A strange tingling radiated from my fingertips. A dull ache pulsed behind my eyes. Reason screamed retreat, yet my feet carried me towards the stairwell, a puppet obeying unseen strings. Darkness pooled at the base of the stairs. I hadn't switched on the hall light. The faint skeletal outlines of the steps ascended into shadow. I paused, listening. The silence wasn't empty. It was thick, expectant, pressing against my eardrums. One step, then another, the notebook clutched like a shield against my chest. The wood groaned its protest under my weight. An unshakable certainty gripped me. Something waited at the landing. Still, I climbed. My heart hammered a frantic tattoo against my ribs, loud in the suffocating quiet. Reaching the top, the hallway light sputtered, casting erratic shadows. The door to the bedroom, where I'd endured the night, stood slightly ajar. A chill draft snaked around me, raising goose flesh. My eyes burned, dry and strained. A subtle shift from the darkness ahead, furniture settling, a footstep. My voice, when I called out, was a thin, reedy thing, swallowed by the oppressive hush. No answer came. Pushing into the bedroom, I flicked the switch. Empty. The bedclothes were disturbed, the closet door half open. A quick inspection revealed nothing, yet the air felt dense, difficult to draw into my lungs, like breathing through damp wool. Back in the flickering hallway, I consulted the notebook again. The symbols seemed sharper now, imbued with a disturbing vitality. Lines coalesced into forms that seemed to writhe at the edge of perception. I rubbed my eyes, blaming fatigue. Then, a soft, dry scraping sound from directly above, the attic hatch. My skin crawled, the square outline in the ceiling seemed suddenly menacing. I rarely ventured into the attic. There was no reason to now. Yet the sound persisted, insistent nails, perhaps, dragging across old wood. Dragging a chair beneath the hatch, I used a broom handle to nudge it open. Dust rained down. A single, naked bulb cast feeble light into the cavernous space, revealing spectral shapes of boxes and shrouded furniture. As I hoisted myself up, the notebook in my hand grew distinctly warmer, radiating a low, penetrating heat. I placed it carefully on the dusty floorboards before pulling myself fully into the attic's embrace. My jeans snagged on a splinter. I flailed, nearly losing my balance. Standing finally, I scanned the gloom-choked expanse. A whisper, faint as moving air, brushed past my ear, unintelligible yet intimate. Crouching, I opened the notebook, turning to the final page. A new sentence materialized. You are close. My heart felt dangerously near bursting. Setting the notebook aside momentarily, I peered into the shadowed corners, thick with cobwebs that shimmered like macabre lace in the weak light. A dust sheet draped a tall mirror. Compelled, I pulled the sheet away. My reflection stared back, pale, eyes wide with strain. In the mirrored surface, the scratches on the notebook's leather cover seemed unnaturally vivid. A disquieting flicker of dissociation struck me. Did the reflection lag just fractionally behind my movements? Nerves, surely. I spun around, suddenly convinced of a presence at my back. Nothing. Only the silent sentinels of forgotten possessions. Retrieving the notebook, I scrambled back down, pulling the hatch closed with a decisive thud. My pulse throbbed in my throat. Retreating to the living room, I sought refuge in action, throwing open windows, willing the evening breeze to cleanse the stagnant air. Sunset bled through the panes, painting the room in shades of deepening violet and gray. I sank onto the couch, the notebook a heavy weight in my lap. Destroy it, burn it, or delve deeper? The fireplace beckoned, promising oblivion, yet the unanswered questions gnawed. What entity scribbled its cryptic messages? What did it want? One more night, I decided. If the phenomena intensified, dawn would see the notebook reduced to ash. True darkness brought a resurgence of the house's unquiet spirit. Floorboards popped overhead like knuckles cracking. Doors eased open on silent hinges, then clicked shut. A frantic rattling commenced from the upstairs bathroom window. Cold sweat trickled down my sides. Steeling myself, I climbed the stairs again, but as my foot hit the landing, the rattling ceased abruptly. The bathroom window was sealed tight. Back in the hall, the light flickered with renewed intensity, though the bulb itself appeared sound. Descending once more, I stopped dead. The notebook lay open on the living room table, a position I hadn't left it in. My throat constricted. Dread, cold and sharp, pierced me, emblazoned on the page in stark, oversized letters. The truth is under the drawer. Memory flashed. The bureau. The initial discovery. Adrenaline surged, hot and metallic. Hands clammy, trembling. I approached the old desk, yanked the drawer free, and set it on the floor. The cavity behind it was thick with dust and shadows. Reaching into the void, my fingertips brushed against something stiff, rectangular. I drew it out. A photograph. My father, younger, stood in this very room, holding a notebook identical to the one in my lap. His expression was grim, haunted. I flipped it over. A date 30 years past. He had never spoken of such things, never hinted at this hidden history. Yet here was the proof. A wave of nausea rolled through me. Placing the photo carefully on the desk, I stared at the notebook. Its pages began to flutter, stirred by an invisible current. My pulse hammered against my eardrums. New words bled onto the page. He knew. The realization struck with the force of a physical blow. My father had walked this path, faced this entity. Had he contained it somehow, or merely hidden it, leaving it for another to find? Tears pricked my eyes. I stumbled back, the notebook clutched tight, its leather now feeling slick with unseen energy. The air grew thick, viscous. A faint dragging sound whispered from the direction of the front door. The brass knobs rattled violently, though the door remained shut. Tension built in my chest, a crushing weight making each breath a struggle. Raising the notebook, I held it poised over the trash can, my arm shaking uncontrollably. Destroy it? Would that end the torment, or unleash something worse? My breathing grew shallow, ragged. Closing my eyes for a fleeting second, I opened them to see the script morphing again. Don't. A skipped heartbeat, a ragged gasp. I lowered my arm, the imperative undeniable. Some deeper instinct, or perhaps the notebook's own influence, compelled me to keep it, to understand. Flipping through the pages, my vision momentarily swam. When it cleared, startlingly vivid images flooded my mind. Endless, narrow corridors cloaked in impenetrable shadow, walls slick with an unseen dampness. The perspective lurched, dizzying. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears. Then as suddenly as it began, the vision fractured, leaving me back in the living room, knuckles white from gripping the notebook, shirt clinging damply to my skin. Muscles screamed with tension. With a surge of desperate energy, I slammed the book shut and thrust it into a small wooden chest in the corner, turning the key in the lock. The weight of fear remained, a palpable presence in the room. Floorboards creaked nearby, a slow, deliberate sound like the house itself drawing breath. My head throbbed. Seeking a moment's clarity, I retreated to the kitchen table, forcing myself to sit, to focus on the ticking clock, the pattern of the linoleum. The walls seemed to lean inwards. The window panes vibrated faintly. My legs felt weak, my palms slick, but I sat, breathing rhythmically, anchoring myself to the present. Minutes crawled by. No new sounds disturbed the fragile peace. Eventually, rising on unsteady legs, I checked the chest. Silence. The notebook remained contained. Whether I will ultimately destroy it or yield again to its pull remains uncertain. The connection is undeniable. The house responds to its cryptic pronouncements. Doors slam, windows rattle, the attic breathes secrets, and unseen things that stir at the periphery. I am torn. Some primal instinct screams for obliteration, yet the need to comprehend, to uncover what my father knew, holds me captive. For now, it stays locked away, a silent, potent weight in the corner of the room. But the cold dread lingers in my chest. Part of me yearns for an end, any end, while another part feels irrevocably bound to this path. I am ensnared by a legacy I never sought, armed only with a cursed notebook and a growing certainty that the truth it offers will be far darker than I can imagine. Until I choose, I wait, vigilant, keeping the lights burning against the encroaching shadows. That mask, I never intended its acquisition, merely drifting through an antiques fair, a weekend diversion, when its patterns, stark crimson against black, ensnared my sight. A tremor, electric and unexpected, shot through me the instant my gaze snagged on it. I dismissed the sensation initially, a mere startle surely, provoked by the audacity of its colors, the alien geometry of its carvings. A fleeting thought, forgotten until my fingers were already coaxing my wallet free. No rationale existed for such a purchase, yet the transaction unfolded. The proprietor, a man whose leer scraped against my nerves, passed it over. Done in less than a minute. I retreated from his stall, the artifact clutched in my hands, a peculiar prickle mapping the nape of my neck. My inaugural error. Upon returning to my apartment, the impulse arose to display it in the living room. Why there, I cannot say. Positioned directly opposite the sofa, its presence became unavoidable, a constant witness. I recall the act vividly, holding its cool weight against the plaster, tapping in a slender nail, securing it. The moment it hung suspended, it seemed to fix its gaze upon me. Stepping back or drawing breath, I felt an unfamiliar constriction hold tight in my chest. The mask itself wasn't imposing in size, yet its hues bled violently against the neutral beige of the wall. Under the room lamp's gentle glow, the red possessed a wet sheen. The black striations held the lusterless density of aged pitch. I attempted to shrug off the strange tension coiling in my shoulders, attributing it to fatigue, perhaps stress. Seeking refuge in the kitchen, I poured water, willing myself toward calm. Returning to the living room, The glass nearly slipped from my grasp. I could have sworn the mask had altered. The sanguine lines appeared infinitesimally broader, the black imbued with a deeper intensity. It seemed to have subtly shifted, though the nail remained steadfast, the angle unchanged. A shake of the head, a muttered denial of my own senses, and I placed the glass upon the coffee table. Later that evening, ensconced before the television, I feigned attention to some flickering late-night program. My focus, however, kept wavering, pulled inexorably toward the object on the wall. Each sideways glance brought the phantom impression of movement within the paint. Leaning forward, peering closer, I could isolate no specific transformation, yet the design itself seemed to pulse with a slow, internal rhythm. I remember rubbing my eyes, feeling the heavy thrum of my heart against my ribs. My palms grew clammy. A dryness constricted my throat. A choked laugh escaped me, an attempt at nonchalance. I flipped through channels, striving for distraction, but the unsettling conviction grew. The mask was observing me, perhaps even blinking its carved eyes. Eventually, surrendering, I extinguished the television and retreated to bed. Thirst roused me near 3 in the morning. Rising, I navigated the darkened hallway toward the kitchen. As I entered the living room, bathed only in the skeletal light filtering through the window blinds from the street lamp outside, my eyes adjusted. It hung there. My breath hitched. My pulse leapt, galloping. For an instant, I perceived movement within its eye slits, those carved voids designed to mimic sight, and felt an unnerving certainty that they tracked my passage across the room. Halting mid-step, a trembling hand swept across my face. A cold perspiration trickled down my spine. Denial warred with the undeniable sensation the mask was following me. Sleep, thereafter, offered little respite. When the morning alarm shrieked, I felt leaden, my neck aching with a profound stiffness. I forced myself through the motions of the day, attempting to banish the mask from my thoughts, yet it remained lodged there, a persistent splinter. Returning home from work, exhaustion weighing me down, my entry into the living room was met by an immediate, involuntary focus on the artifact. The crimson paint seemed darker now, bordering on maroon. The black lines possessed the dull gleam of wet charcoal. The very contours of the mask appeared tauter, as if clenching some unseen muscle. Disquiet settled deep within me. Hanging my coat over a chair, I stood immobile for a moment, assailed by a wave of nausea. The room felt suddenly confining, the mask seeming to swell, consuming the available space. Subtler phenomena began to manifest in the ensuing days. Averted eyes, flicked back moments later, might catch the fleeting image of a tiny bead of red, glistening where none had been before, or I'd register the faint impression of a newly formed curve within a black stripe. It felt as though the mask were actively rewriting its own surface whenever my attention lapsed. On certain evenings, sitting in profound silence, a soft susurrus would reach my ears, like fabric shifting, someone adjusting their position for comfort. My gaze would dart around the room, seeking the source. Windows, vents, furniture. Always, the tightening in my chest confirmed the sound emanated from the mask's vicinity. A week into this ordeal, the nocturnal awakenings became more frequent. Each time, compelled, I would find myself standing in the living room doorway, staring at the mask. My legs felt tenuous, requiring conscious effort to remain steady, my breathing deliberate. The eye slits invariably seemed wider, the carved voids expanding. Its gaze felt inescapable. Even retreating to the kitchen for water, I sensed its presence behind me, a palpable leaning forward. Vertigo threatened, my vision sometimes blurred at the edges. By the time I crawled back into bed, sweat slicked my skin. The disturbances weren't confined to the night. One Saturday morning, resolving to dust the living room, reasoning that mundane activity might soothe my frayed nerves, I approached the mask, soft cloth in hand. I stopped. A faint odor permeated the air, the acrid tang of old iron, metallic and sour. Bringing the cloth near, I hesitated, reluctant to make contact. The smell induced a bitterness in my throat, tightened my stomach, and sparked a sudden headache. Edging closer, I brushed the cloth against the mask's perimeter. For a fleeting, horrifying second, I swore the surface beneath felt warm, yielding slightly like living tissue. I dropped the cloth as if burned and stumbled backward, nearly upending the coffee table. That same afternoon, the resolve formed: remove it, discard it. My hands trembled as I reached toward the wall. Fingers brushed the edges, and I felt it, a distinct thrum, a low-frequency vibration. Not powerful, but definite enough to send a jolt of tension up my arms. I snatched my hand back, retreating several paces with quick, jerky steps. My heart hammered violently, breath catching in my throat. Closing my eyes, I counted slowly to 10, seeking equilibrium. Then, turning abruptly, I marched out of the living room, pulling the door firmly shut behind me. Craven, perhaps, but paralyzed by an unknown dread. From that point, I slept with the bedroom door secured. A small lamp remained lit in the hallway. Darkness felt menacing, amplified by the knowledge of what hung just beyond the door. Some nights, I imagined faint, skittering taps originating from the living room. Other nights brought only silence, stretching into hours spent staring at the ceiling, sleepless. My dreams grew fractured, unsettling, leaving me drained upon waking. A permanent knot of tension resided between my shoulder blades. My appetite waned. Concentration at work became a struggle. One evening, washing my hands in the bathroom, a sudden intrusive thought struck. Is there something on my face? Why this occurred, I have no idea. Leaning toward the mirror, I examined my reflection. Pale, eyes bloodshot. Then a visceral clench in my chest. For the briefest fraction of a second, the face staring back wasn't mine. It bore stark white eyes, skin painted in streaks of crimson and black. The vision dissolved almost instantly, but it sent me staggering backward, hands slipping on the slick porcelain of the sink. I fought to dismiss it as a trick of the light, an artifact of fatigue, but the insistent pounding in my skull refused to subside. Thereafter, I began catching glimpses of that painted visage in reflective surfaces, a darkened window pane at night, the inert screen of the television, even the polished sheen of the kitchen backsplash. Each fleeting encounter delivered a sickening lurch in my gut. Those vacant white eyes, the lurid markings, followed by the jarring return of my own anxious reflection. Always instantaneous, yet leaving my heart hammering against my ribs. Another time, standing defiantly in the living room, every light blazing against the encroaching shadows, I noticed a glint near the mask. Droplets. Wet paint, it seemed. Stepping closer, I saw the liquid was thick, a dark, viscous red, almost brownish. I extended a finger, then recoiled. A profound chill permeated my body, accompanied by rising nausea. Fetching an old rag from the kitchen, I attempted to wipe the droplets away. They smeared against the wall, leaving faint, ugly stains. A high-pitched ringing commenced in my ears. Dropping the rag, I pressed my palms hard against my temples. An insidious conviction began to coalesce. I needed to do something. This couldn't persist. The mask, I felt with growing certainty, was making a demand, yearning for some kind of ritualistic acknowledgement. The notion intensified over the following days, not a clear command, nothing spoken, but a persistent, nagging pressure in the recesses of my mind, urging me to appease it. It seemed to crave a specific act, one that would bring it satisfaction. What that act might be remained terrifyingly obscure. I found myself pacing the living room, staring at it, waiting for a sign, a clue. My chest remained tight. I gnawed my fingernails raw. Nights were restless voids. Days were taut with unspoken anticipation. One evening, I resolved to try again. Donning rubber gloves, a flimsy barrier against the unknown, I approached the mask. The objective: take it down, conceal it in a closet, banish it from sight. As I drew nearer, the very air in the room seemed to thicken, growing heavy. The low thrum returned, vibrating not just in my ears, but seemingly in the floorboards. My legs quaked, my mouth turned to dust. Reaching out, gloved fingers made contact with the sides. The vibration intensified, a palpable low pulse coursing through the material. My vision swam, my head spun violently. I jerked my hands back, grabbing the edge of the nearby mantelpiece for support, struggling to remain upright. Eyes locked on the mask, I leaned forward, breath escaping in ragged staccato gasps. Panic surged, cold and sharp. Smash it? Burn it? The thoughts flared, instantly extinguished by a deeper fear. What might happen if I damaged it? It seemed fused to the wall, radiating its own dark energy. Stumbling from the room, I slammed the door shut and collapsed onto the hallway floor, hands shaking uncontrollably. My shirt clung, soaked in sweat. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my sternum. That night, the allure of escape, a friend's sofa, an anonymous motel room, warred with an inexplicable tether binding me to this place. What might transpire if I left the mask unattended in my home? Visions of marred walls, of the object moving freely, plagued my thoughts. My mind felt like a tangled knot, pacing, sipping water, attempting distraction via television, all futile. My gaze kept returning to the closed living room door, half expecting to see it inch open, to glimpse the mask peering out. Finally, sinking onto the sofa in the adjacent room, facing the forbidden door, exhaustion washed over me in a debilitating wave. My hands ached from incessant clenching. My throat felt raw from shallow, panicked breathing. Confrontation seemed inevitable. The mask desired a ritual, yet its nature remained shrouded. A chilling dread grew. Fail to discern its want, and this haunting would persist, intensifying until I yielded. But the very concept of performing anything it might desire filled me with profound revulsion. Imagining kneeling before it, uttering strange words, my stomach churned, No instructions, no guidance, only this oppressive feeling. This morning, waking from a fitful sleep, I stood before the living room door. My hand hovered above the knob. A slow count to 5, a twist, and I stepped inside. It hung where I had left it, yet its presence felt amplified, the crimson lines glistening with unnatural vibrancy, the black stripes seeming sharper, more defined. Swallowing past the lump constricting my throat, I walked directly toward it, each step burdened by trembling limbs. My own heartbeat thundered in my ears. Close enough now to discern the fine crason in the paint, the rough grain of the wood beneath. My breathing grew shallow, erratic. My hands felt icy. I spoke aloud, the words clumsy, foolish even to my own ears. "What do you want?" my voice quavered. Silence answered, yet my mind felt dense, as if encountering resistance. I asked again, my voice cracking under the strain. A jolt of pure panic electrified my nerves. Dizziness washed over me. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead. My deepest instincts screamed I stood on the precipice of something irrevocable, utterly unknown. The mask simply stared back through its impassive slits. Was that a faint twitch near the corners? My scalp prickled. My knees threatened to buckle. I remained suspended in that moment, writing this, the mask affixed to the wall behind me. Its presence is a tangible weight against my back. My mouth is parched. My fingertips feel numb as my gaze flicks constantly over my shoulder, anticipating movement, change. None has occurred yet. The imminence feels absolute. The walls of this apartment press inward. The air tastes stale, used. I don't know what the mask desires, and the prospect of discovery terrifies me. My sole strategy is to maintain control, to resist whatever insidious pressure it exerts. But each night, I feel its scrutiny, demanding something more. Its sentience is undeniable, its fixation upon me, inescapable. I curse the impulse that led me from that antiques fair with this thing in my possession, but regret changes nothing. Now I am bound to it. This writing is an anchor, an attempt at calm, but the tension remains, a relentless hum beneath the surface. How this culminates, I cannot fathom. For now there is only the waiting and the unwavering stare of the mask. The memory remains crystalline. The moment Elias, camera clutched tight, stepped past the threshold of that forsaken railroad passage, his torch beam stuttering against the encroaching dark. He'd anticipated little more than sepulchral quiet, perhaps the skeletal beauty of corroded architecture. That expectation dissolved the instant a second respiration, not his own, began its counterpoint in the gloom. He'd unearthed the tunnel's existence via a dusty corner of a local historical society's website, a forgotten artery where locomotives once thundered decades prior, now severed and silent. Whispers on obscure forums spoke of intriguing arches, remnant supports holding up the earth. Elias craved images of these decaying monoliths for a personal photographic study. Solitude was his companion. Acquaintances were claimed by weekend obligations. His pack, cinched tight, held essentials: water, a spare torch, the vital camera apparatus. He arrived as dusk bled across the sky. The tunnel maw gaped wider than imagined, tracks long plundered, leaving only treacherous, rock-strewn footing that descended into shadow. Concrete verges crumbled, besieged by tenacious weeds and fledgling shrubs. Pointing his torch inward yielded only profound blackness, the light catching fugitive glimpses of ancient graffiti scars and the slow weep of water from overhead fissures. Each drip resonated like a struck chime against the concrete. He ventured inside, each footfall measured, deliberate. An immediate chill permeated the air, a stark contrast to the evening warmth outside. Deeper he walked, the torchlight sweeping across murals of faded spray paint. These tags, likely relics of past trespassers, grew sparser the further he penetrated the tunnel's throat. The atmosphere thickened with the scent of damp stone and ancient mold. His own steps boomed in the confined space, his breathing unnervingly loud, yet measured. He attempted preliminary shots, the camera's flash momentarily annihilating the darkness, too harsh. Adjusting the settings, he opted for a longer exposure, deploying his tripod, carefully angling its legs on the uneven ground. It was during this setup, a moment of stillness, that a sound pricked his awareness, a subtle noise from behind. Respiration, he thought initially, surely his own breath, thrown back by the tunnel's peculiar acoustics. He tried syncing the rhythm, inhale, exhale, no match. His own breathing was quickened by the low thrum of exploratory excitement. The sound he heard was languid, deliberate. A trick of the space, he insisted silently, returning to his task, pushing the disturbance aside. Once the shot was captured, reviewing the small glowing screen, a coldness traced its path down his spine. Again, the breathing, calm, steady, the meticulous draw and release of air by unseen lungs. He extinguished his torch, plunging himself into absolute black, straining his eyes for any silhouette against the deeper void. Nothing. The darkness felt total, tangible. Light from the entrance, now a distant, hazy memory, offered no solace. He stood suspended, holding his own breath, listening. His pulse hammered a frantic beat against his eardrums. A distant drip punctuated the silence. Then, the distinct sound of something shifting on the ground, a faint scuff. Not him. His torch flared back to life, the beam slicing wildly in a circle. Empty space greeted him. Rough walls wept with moisture, riddled with cracks. An old maintenance door, rusted and listing, clung precariously to one side. The floor are a scatter of pebbles and the ghosts of discarded beer cans. He wrestled his nerves, whispering rationalizations, an animal perhaps, or water playing tricks. Yet the profound sense of unease remained, a stubborn countercurrent to logic. Pressing onward, Elias swept his light back and forth in a slow, deliberate arc, pausing intermittently to capture images of the decaying support beams overhead. Persistent, dripping marked spots where the tunnel's ceiling wept steadily. The further he advanced, the more the temperature seemed to plummet, his breath misting faintly before him. The walls grew slicker, the torch revealing long, glistening streaks of moisture. Then he saw them, strange smears, distinctly unnatural. Closer inspection revealed handprints. They appeared disturbingly fresh, droplets still coalescing around the clear outlines of fingers and palms pressed against the cold concrete. His heart rate surged. These were no random stains. The shape was undeniable. Water trickled down the edges of each print. Tentatively, he touched one. The surface felt slick, frigid. His fingertips came away damp. Wiping them absently on his trousers, he scanned the ground for corresponding footprints. Only his own boot marks disturbed the thin layer of dust and scattered stones. Just then, the breathing returned, closer. He froze, spun around. His torch beam stabbed into an empty corridor, identical damp walls, the same uneven floor. A tremor ran through his hand as he swept the light. He half expected a figure to coalesce from the shadows, but there was nothing. His mouth felt parched, a forced, deep breath. Just the dark, he told himself, your mind conjuring phantoms. But the conviction of another presence lingered, cold and insistent. He resolved to continue forward. The tunnel, according to his research, stretched roughly half a mile. He would reach the other end soon. He adopted a steady pace, consciously trying to block out the sporadic soft scuffs, the unsettling echoes that seemed to dog his steps. Each footfall felt amplified, intrusive. His backpack seemed to gain weight, the strap biting into his shoulder. The chill air numbed his face. A subtle draft began to push against him, emanating from deeper within the tunnel, a faint, cool exhalation from the far end. He paused to drink, his hand trembling slightly as he lifted the water bottle. A few swallows, and then listening intently in the renewed silence, the rhythmic respiration resumed, seemingly just behind him. He whirled, torch held high like a weapon. Nothing. His heart pounded against his ribs. Oh, keep moving. Minutes later, a distinct tap on his shoulder, light, almost tentative, like a single finger prod. He flinched violently, nearly fumbling the torch. He spun so rapidly he staggered, the beam dancing erratically. Only the weeping wall met his gaze. The spot on his shoulder tingled where the contact occurred, dripping water from above. He checked the ceiling, dry. His pulse became a frantic drumbeat. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the penetrating cold. His torch flickered ominously, emitting a faint buzz. A sharp tap against its casing steadied the beam. He forced himself onward, quickening his pace now, his boots echoing in a hurried staccato. His light glanced off remnants of old railroad ties embedded in the floor, splintered and decaying hazards he carefully avoided. Nearing what he prayed was the exit, a dim luminescence appeared ahead. Not daylight, the sun had long set. It was a faint, spectral shimmer, its source elusive. A short distance further, the tunnel widened into what might have been an old loading area or equipment cache. The main passage continued straight, but the space broadened to either side. Here the air felt markedly colder. His torch beam slid across something on the left, a makeshift table or platform. Drawing closer, he saw them, small candles, melted into puddles of dark wax, arranged in a rough circle, all extinguished, but undeniably recent. They rested on an old sheet of metal laid across fractured cinder blocks. Crude symbols were scratched deeply into the metal surface, jagged and indecipherable. Beside the candles lay a small, unsettling pile of bones, delicate, non-human, perhaps avian. They were clustered together purposefully. The entire arrangement radiated a disquieting energy, a primitive altar in the cold, subterranean dark. He recoiled, palms slick with sweat. That peculiar breeze strengthened, whispering from the tunnel's depths, raising gooseflesh on his arms. It was gentle yet frigid, carrying an earthy, damp scent like disturbed soil. It snaked beneath his jacket, amplifying his sense of vulnerability. His breathing grew ragged. He fought for composure, sweeping the torchlight around, probing the shadows. More wet handprints adorned the walls near this crude shrine, as if someone had braced themselves there. Leaning closer to examine one, he watched water trace a path down from the glistening palm mark. A scrape sounded behind him, something dragging across the rock-strewn floor. He pivoted sharply. His light caught a fleeting suggestion of movement near the altar, a shape withdrawing swiftly behind a thick support column. Heart hammering, Elias advanced, bathing the column in light, empty. The rush of his own blood roared in his ears, his mouth desert dry. Retreat screamed through his mind, yet a morbid curiosity warred with his fear. He'd come for unique photographs, hadn't he? And this bizarre altar demanded documentation. Who would believe him otherwise? He raised his camera, firing off several shots, the flash momentarily banishing the shadows, starkly illuminating the cracked concrete, the metal sheet, the waxen remnants. Again, the breathing, now seeming to emanate from his right. He spun, instinctively triggering another flash, capturing only empty space, damp walls. His hands shook uncontrollably. He pressed on toward the faint glow he desperately hoped signified escape. The tunnel began a slight curve, obscuring any clear view ahead. The breeze intensified, gusting against his face, stirring debris on the floor. Loose pebbles shifted, scraps of ancient paper rustled like dry leaves. He cast his torch beam down the passage, searching for an opening. No daylight, no sign of the outside world. Perhaps the exit was blocked, or simply further than anticipated. He paused near a ragged breach in the wall, a dark cavity suggesting a small side passage, bristling with exposed rebar. Water pooled at its base. He considered investigating, but a profound sense of wrongness emanated from that deeper darkness. He skirted past it. Another soft scraping noise from behind. He pivoted, torch raised, muscles tensed for confrontation. Nothing, just the oppressive dark. Short, shallow gasps marked his breathing now. The urge to flee became overwhelming. His skin felt clammy, his boots scuffing loudly on the uneven ground. Every minute sound, a drip, a shift of rock, made him jump. Tension knotted his shoulders, aching his neck. The possibility of another person lurking, hiding, sent a fresh wave of ice through his veins. He just wanted out. He wanted home. Finally, the passage straightened, and the faint glow resolved into discernible moonlight filtering through the far entrance. Relief washed over him, potent and dizzying. He broke into a near run, stumbling over loose stones. Close to the threshold, compelled by a final chilling instinct, he turned back one last time, sweeping his torch across the corridor he'd just traversed. There, stark upon the damp ground, were wet footprints. He hadn't seen them before. They weren't his boot prints. These were narrower, eerily distinct, like impressions left by bare feet. At least 4, leading directly toward him. Had they followed him from the depths, or materialized right behind him? His heart slammed against his ribs, and then precisely as before, that light, definite tap on his shoulder. He spun with a choked cry, nearly falling, flashlight beams slashing wildly through the air. Who's there? The words ripped from his throat, echoing endlessly down the tunnel, swallowed by the vast emptiness. Silence answered, save for a single, distant drip. His head pounded. Backing slowly toward the exit, Never turning away from the darkness within, his torch trembled violently. Mere steps from freedom, the breeze surged into a cold gust, physically pushing him forward. He switched off the torch, letting his eyes adjust to the pale moonlight bathing the overgrown concrete outside. He stumbled out, gulping the cool night air, legs trembling beneath him. He looked back. The tunnel mouth was a void, silent, inert. But he knew something resided in that blackness. The wet handprints, the bone altar, the phantom breathing. The memories crowded in. He stood there for a long minute, gathering himself, the sudden quiet of the world outside feeling alien after the tunnel's resonant confinement. He glanced at his camera, later reviewing the images. Mostly blurry shots of dark, weeping walls, glimpses of the unsettling altar. No figures lurked in the frames, only ambiguous shapes in the shadowed corners, tricks of light and debris. Without a backward glance then, he began the trek to his car. His hands still shook. Paranoia compelled him to check over his shoulder every few steps. Inside the vehicle, doors locked, he sat for a long moment, just breathing, the engine off. His chest felt tight, his hair damp with cold sweat. Starting the car, he drove away, a heavy, sinking feeling in his gut. His eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror, half expecting a pursuer. Only the empty ribbon of road stretched behind him. No explanation ever surfaced for the breathing, the handprints, the footprints. The photographs remain on his hard drive, digital ghosts of dark walls, water trails, and that strange candle-strewn altar. Looking at them still conjures the cold tension that gripped him in the tunnel's depths. He harbors no intention of returning. When asked about the most terrifying place he's ever ventured, the abandoned railroad tunnel invariably surfaces first. And whenever the memory of that intangible touch brushes against his shoulder, his skin crawls anew. One o'clock blinked into existence, the crimson numerals painting a spectral luminescence across the hushed consoles of the emergency dispatch hub. Night shifts had always been my refuge, a sanctuary woven from silence, but this particular pre-dawn quiet was poised on the brink of annihilation, destined to be fractured by a voice that would burrow into the marrow of my bones. 5 years I'd navigated the currents of crisis from this chair. Ilara, that's me, a veteran of heart-stopping moments and shattered windows, accustomed to the frantic pulse of catastrophe relayed through fiber optics. Yet no amount of adrenaline-fueled history could steel me for the voice waiting on the line. The evening had unfolded with unusual languor, a mere trickle of minor incidents, barely disturbing the stillness. My hand, lifting a mug of tepid coffee, froze midair as the console chirped alive, an electronic summons in the gloom. My voice, practiced and steady, adhered to protocol. Emergency line, state your situation. A beat of silence stretched, taut as a wire, before a man spoke, his tone preternaturally serene, almost conversational. I see you, Ilara. Ice, sharp and sudden, traced my vertebrae. My name, echoing in this sterile space from an unknown throat. I scanned the empty banks of monitors, the shadowed corners, suddenly feeling intensely visible, pinned by an unseen gaze. Sir, this frequency is reserved for urgent matters. If you require assistance. His interruption was seamless, velvet over steel. The cobalt sweater, a ceramic mug clumsily painted by your little girl last spring, holds your coffee. A visceral cold flooded me, leaching the warmth from my skin. My arms instinctively crossed my chest, a futile shield against an invisible observer. Identify yourself, I managed, the words tight in my throat. How do you know these things? A low chuckle slithered through the receiver, intimate and repulsive, raising the hairs on my neck. Observation, Ilara, prolonged observation. You are compelling. My thoughts fragmented, racing down dead ends. Was this some elaborate, cruel jest? A colleague's twisted humor? No. A deeper, primal instinct screamed danger, recognizing the predatory stillness beneath the calm facade. Sir, protocol requires I terminate this non-emergency communication if... Don't. The voice snapped, losing its silken edge for a fraction of a second, revealing the hardness beneath. Dare to disconnect, and you'll regret it. Our interaction has barely begun. A knot formed deep in my gut. My finger hovered, trembling slightly, over the trace activation key. What is it you want? A diversion, he purred, the unsettling amusement returning to his tone. A little game. You enjoy them, don't you, Ilara? Witnessed you myself just last week, engrossed in wordplay with your partner on the back patio. My pulse hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. He'd been near my home, seen my family. Nausea rose, bitter in my throat. The authorities are being notified. I bluffed, my voice thin, betraying the fear I fought to conceal. Another laugh, dry and dismissive this time. My dear Ilara, you are the authorities, their conduit, their ears, their fragile link to the chaos. But who watches over the watcher, Who is your lifeline? My finger stabbed the trace button, a silent plea winging its way through the complex circuitry, praying for a swift lock. Listen, whoever you are or whatever sick objective you have. I told you, he countered, impatience threading his tone now. A game, and participation isn't optional. What followed was an agonizing hour, a meticulous, terrifying dissection of my existence relayed by that disembodied voice. He recounted fragments of my daily routine, intimate family moments I thought private, echoes from a childhood buried under years of mundane adulthood, knowledge no outsider could possibly possess. Each accurately placed detail felt like a physical blow, a fresh violation, amplifying the dread coiling tighter and tighter inside me. I kept him tethered to the line, feeding him meaningless prompts, desperate questions, anything to buy precious time for the trace. Around me, a quiet urgency had taken hold. My colleagues, alerted by my strained posture and the flagged call, sensed the anomaly, their fingers flying across keyboards, chasing digital ghosts in the network. But he was elusive, a phantom bouncing between encrypted proxies and scrambled signals, always one step ahead. Why? The question escaped me, barely a whisper across the charged silence. Why are you doing this? Because power permits it, came the simple, chilling reply. Because witnessing the erosion of your composure, seeing the terror bloom in your eyes as your precious vulnerability is laid bare, it provides a certain undeniable satisfaction. Acid tears pricked behind my eyelids. I blinked them furiously away. He wouldn't see me break, not fully. You're twisted, I spat, injecting venom I didn't feel. And when they find you, if, he amended smoothly, correcting me with infuriating calm. If they find me, unlikely, I remain perpetually ahead, Ilara, always observing, always attending, as if orchestrated to underscore his claim. My personal mobile vibrated sharply on the desk beside the console. A text message glowed against the dark screen. Look out. Against every rational instinct, against the screaming claxons in my own mind, my head swiveled towards the wide window overlooking the deserted employee lot. Silhouetted against the sickly orange glow of the sodium lamps stood a lone figure near the perimeter fence, indistinct but undeniably present, clutching a small illuminated rectangle, a phone. A strangled sound caught in my throat, half gasp, half sob. Dear Lord, divinity offers no sanctuary here, the voice on the emergency line murmured, perfectly timed. Only I hold that key. Paralyzed by a dread colder than the night air outside, I watched the distant figure lift an arm in a slow, deliberate, mocking wave. What do you demand? I pleaded, the dam of my control finally breaching, the professional facade crumbling into raw fear. What do you want from me? I explained, Ilara, he said, his voice almost gentle now, which was somehow worse. The game, and it has only just commenced. Click. Silence hummed on the line. Immobility claimed me for a heartbeat, shock rendering the world distant and muffled, the blinking lights of the console suddenly unreal. Then, raw adrenaline surged through me like an electric current. Marcus, my voice cracked the operational calm, sharp with terror. Explanations tumbled out, fragmented but urgent enough to convey the gravity. Lockdown protocols slammed into place with jarring finality. Patrol cars converged on the building, their sweeping beams cutting through the darkness, searching the asphalt expanse, but the parking lot yielded nothing. The figure had dissolved into the night's fabric, as if conjured from shadow itself. The ensuing hours bled together, a confusing montage of flashing blue and red lights filtering through the blinds, hushed, urgent questions from uniformed officers, the repetitive loop of security feeds revealing only shadows and supposition. No digital footprint sturdy enough to hold, no physical clue left behind. He was smoke, an enigma. As the first gray, tentative fingers of dawn probed the eastern sky, I found myself huddled in the starkly lit break room, a coarse emergency blanket draped around my shoulders, cradling a mug of unwanted scalding coffee. Marcus, my supervisor, occupied the opposite chair, his usually composed face drawn with fatigue and deep concern. "We'll get this person, Alara," he stated, his voice low but firm, a rock in the swirling chaos. "Every available resource is being dedicated to this." A hollow nod was all I could muster, the certainty that this ordeal had merely paused, not concluded, settling cold and heavy within me. And I was right. He kept his twisted promise. The calls persisted, sometimes piercing the professional hum of the dispatch center during my shifts, other times violating the supposed sanctity of my home, ringing my personal line, always shifting numbers, always defying location technology, always that same calm, terrifying voice. No overt menaces were ever uttered, no specific demands made, yet the implication hung heavy and suffocating in the air between his words. "I see you, always." My existence warped into a state of exhausting hypervigilance, a waking phantasmagoria where every floorboard creak, every unexpected ringtone, every passing car outside my window sent jolts of pure terror through me. Sleep offered no escape. Haunted by imagined whispers, appetite vanished entirely. Fear became a corrosive acid, eating away at my core day by day. Authorities swathed my house in electronic eyes, assigned round-the-clock protection to my bewildered husband and daughter, who were temporarily relocated, yet these measures felt flimsy, ultimately permeable. He invariably slipped through the cracks, a whisper on the line, a chilling periodic reminder of my utter exposure. 7 days crawled by since the initial intrusion, each one longer than the last. I sat alone in my house one evening, the enforced absence of my husband and daughter amplifying every nocturnal sigh and settling groan of the structure. It felt cavernous, watchful, expectant. When my phone shrilled its unwelcome summons, a tremor ran through my hand as I numbly answered, already knowing who it would be. "Greetings, Alara." The familiar, hateful cadence slid into my ear, smooth as poison. Feeling my absence? The last vestiges of my strength, worn thin by a week of sleepless vigilance and gnawing dread, finally crumbled. "Please," I breathed, the word fractured, barely audible. "I beg you, what is the price? Name it. Just cease this. Leave me alone." A protracted silence hummed across the line before, unexpectedly, he exhaled, a sound almost like weariness, or perhaps satisfaction. "Ah, Ilara, is it not obvious? This precise moment, your unraveling. This was the objective all along, to shatter your perceived security, to demonstrate conclusively that the control you cherish, the order you represent, is merely gossamer, easily torn by determined hands." Tears tracked hot paths down my cheeks, unchecked now. "But why target me?" "You," he stated, his voice devoid of inflection, chillingly objective, embodied the fallacy I detest: security, order, the naive conviction that a voice through a wire, a system, can somehow hold back the world's inherent darkness and chaos. The truth required demonstration. A fragile, desperate hope flickered within the wreckage of my composure. So, it's finished? A soft, dry chuckle, devoid of any warmth. Indeed, the game concludes. The lesson is imparted, is it not, Ilara? Genuine safety. You will never know it again. And then, for the last time, the connection severed, leaving only the dial tone's empty drone. He kept his twisted promise. The silence held this time. Authorities chased phantoms, pored over useless data, eventually archiving the unsolved case as untraceable harassment. Slowly, painstakingly, the rhythms of ordinary life began to reassert themselves, like grass pushing through cracked pavement. My family returned, their presence a balm, filling the house once more with familiar sounds. Work resumed its demanding, often harrowing pace. Yet his parting words echoed constantly in the quiet spaces of my mind, proving chillingly prophetic. The bedrock of perceived safety, once implicitly trusted, had fractured permanently. Every ringing phone, even now, carries a potential echo of his voice. Every fleeting shadow glimpsed in my peripheral vision, every sudden, unexpected noise in the night resurrects a phantom limb of that primal fear. Is he still observing from some unseen vantage point? A dark corner of my mind insists he is, perhaps eternally, a silent audience to my life. But I will not surrender the terrain of my future to his spectral occupancy. I endured. I am not merely what was done to me, I am the response to it. The nightmare inscribed itself onto my memory, an indelible scar, yet it will not dictate the narrative of my future. There lies my ultimate quiet defiance, to embrace existence, to seek meaning and connection, and even joy despite the scars he inflicted. And with every emergency call I field, every panicked voice I meet with calm guidance, every life potentially touched across the wires, the purpose crystallizes anew. We answer the call not because the world is a safe and predictable place, but precisely because it isn't, and because voices like mine, however fallible, must strive against the darkness, fighting to make it just a little bit safer, one urgent human call at a time. A brittle crack split the forest hush, anchoring my boots to the earth. Breath caught, suspended. I listened, every nerve straining against the profound quiet. Again, that dry, deliberate fragmentation of leaves beneath a substantial weight. Something, or someone, inhabited the surrounding blackness, its attention fixed on me. And I, Elias Thorne, 29, Lynn Smith from Portland, stood utterly adrift, leagues from any semblance of settlement, armed only with a faltering beam of light, and the clothes clinging to my skin. This Oregonian hinterland, vast and untamed, was meant to yield images of the phantom gray wolf. A simple 3-day immersion, or so the itinerary promised. Yet here, enveloped by palpable night, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, the assignment had twisted into something elemental, something perilous. The day had unfolded with deceptive normalcy. Deeper and deeper I'd pressed into the timber, establishing a meager camp near a sun-dappled clearing whispered to be wolf territory. Twilight beckoned, and with it my camera, seeking that fleeting moment of predatory grace in the day's dying embers. But as true night descended, the threads of control began to unravel. My GPS, a beacon of digital certainty, sputtered into baffling silence, erasing my position from its small, indifferent screen. Then, attempting a retreat toward the remembered campsite, my torch developed a tremor, its light yellowing, weakening. Unmoored, anxiety a rising tide within me, I pushed onward, scanning the gloom for any familiar sentinel of trunk or stone. That's when the awareness first coalesced, a prickling sensation across the nape, an ancient instinct stirring. Then, the sounds, furtive rustlings in the undergrowth, the infrequent punctuation of a breaking branch. Mere nocturnal creatures, I reasoned initially, the forest breathing around me. But the disturbances grew bolder, less random, imbued with a chilling deliberation. The realization struck, cold and sharp. I was being trailed. My thoughts fragmented, scattering like startled birds, bear, cougar perhaps, with grim irony, the very wolves I'd pursued. No scenario offered solace. My pace quickened, caution jettisoned. Finding camp no longer mattered, only distance counted now, distance from the unseen companion dogging my steps. Yet with every clumsy, hurried footfall, the sounds behind intensified, drawing inexorably nearer. Panic, raw and insistent, began its siege. Lost in this immense, lightless cathedral of trees, my torch failing, an unknown pursuer closing in. Logic screamed for composure, for strategy, but a primal terror clawed its way upward, demanding blind flight into the swallowing dark. Just as that impulse threatened to overwhelm reason, my boot snagged on a gnarled, exposed root. The world tilted. Air exploded from my lungs as I met the forest floor with bruising force. My camera bag ripped from my shoulder, disgorging costly glass and metal across the leaf litter. The flashlight tumbled from my grasp, spasmed once, twice, and extinguished, plunging me into absolute black. A moment of stunned stillness, winded and disoriented. Then I heard it. Footfalls, measured and slow, converging on my position. Adrenaline detonated within me. I scrabbled onto hands and knees, fingers sweeping frantically through the detritus for the lost torch. My hand closed around its cool cylinder just as a twig snapped, impossibly close, mere feet away. Heart vaulting into my throat, I raised the light like a desperate talisman and thumbed the switch. A frail cone of illumination splashed against legs, human legs, sheathed in soiled denim. My gaze crawled upward, past a frayed, weather-beaten jacket to a countenance that iced my veins. The man before me was a creature sculpted by the wild, beard tangled and feral, eyes gleaming with a disturbing, luminous intensity. He gripped a roughly fashioned spear, its sharpened point catching a wicked gleam in the torch's dying rays. "Well now," he rasped, the sound abrasive, unused. "What's this stumbled into my larder?" My mouth worked, but yielded only silence. Terror had scoured my mind blank. He crouched, bringing his face level with mine, the rank odor of his breath preceding his words. "You're a fair piece from the pavement, city fella. These woods, they don't favor your sort." I I'm just a photographer. The words tore free, ragged. No trouble intended. He produced a laugh, a harsh, grating sound that vibrated down my spine. Troubles found you regardless. The question is, what am I to do with it? As he mused, my eyes snagged on details. The clothes, though grimed, bore the ghost of quality outdoor wear. And there, stitched to the jacket's breast, a faded emblem I knew, the insignia of a search and rescue unit. "You're Silas Thorne," I gasped, the name surfacing from buried news reports. The Ranger, vanished 5 years back. His eyes widened fractionally, then narrowed, suspicion eclipsing surprise. "How do you know that name?" "The news," I explained, words tumbling out. "Huge search operation. They never found any trace." Silas, if it was truly him, remained silent for a protracted moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was altered, quieter, laced with an echo of something akin to sorrow. "Didn't search deep enough. Or maybe they searched the wrong woods entirely." "What happened?" The question slipped out, curiosity momentarily eclipsing fear. He rose abruptly, pacing a confined, restless circle. Got turned around, hurt bad. By the time I could walk proper, winter had locked the door, couldn't find the way back. He halted, pinning me with that unsettling gaze. But I endured, learned things about this forest, about what's left when everything else is stripped away. "Let me help you," I urged, seizing the perceived shift. "I can get word out, call for rescue." "Rescue?" The word was a snarl, sudden fury flaring in his eyes. "Don't need rescuing. This is mine now, my domain." He hefted the spear, and I instinctively recoiled. But instead of aggression, he used its length to gesture into the profound darkness. "You're the one needs rescuing, city fella. Lost, alone, unready for what this place does to a man." I nodded frantically. "You're right. Utterly lost. Please, if you could just show me, point me toward a trail, a road." Silas cut me off with another bark of laughter, devoid of humor. "Not so simple. These woods, they pare you down. Peel off the soft city layers, leave the bone and gristle underneath." He leaned close again, his wild eyes searching mine. "Tell me, photographers, you feeling particularly civilized right now?" I swallowed, the lump in my throat thick. The rawness of my own fear, the desperate thrum of survival instinct just beneath the surface, was undeniable. "I just want to go home," I whispered. Something in the admission, perhaps its utter sincerity, seemed to penetrate his hardened exterior. Silas straightened, the conflict stark upon his weathered features. For a long beat, he stood motionless, the spear half twisting in his grip as an unseen battle waged within him. Finally, a protracted sigh escaped his lips. "All right, city fella, I'll walk you out, not 'cause I give a damn about your hide, but because I need a messenger." Hope, sharp and unexpected flared in my chest. Anything. What message? Tell him Silas Thorne lives, but tell him not to come seeking. This is my ground now, and I'll hold it. With that declaration, he turned and plunged into the trees. I scrambled, gathering my scattered gear with trembling hands, then lurched after him, terrified of losing my improbable guide in the suffocating blackness. We moved for what felt like an eternity. Silas navigated the terrain with a fluid, innate grace born of profound intimacy, while I stumbled and crashed in his wake. Occasionally he spoke, offering disjointed fragments of his ordeal. The brush with death that first brutal winter, the slow, painful adaptation, the gradual erosion of any desire to rejoin the world he'd left behind. As the first faint dilution of night promised dawn, a sound reached my ears that made my spirit leap, the distant hum of engines, a road. Silas halted at the forest fringe, a distinct boundary between his world and the one I sought. This is my stop. Follow that tarmac. Gas station about 5 miles down. He began to turn away, then paused, looking back one last time. Remember the promise, city fella. Tell them I'm alive. Tell them I'm where I belong. Before another word could be uttered, he dissolved back into the dense woods, leaving me solitary at the roadside. The remainder of the day became a hazy montage, reaching the station, the calls, the patient recounting of a sanitized version of events to sheriff's deputies and forestry officials. I honored my pact with Silas, speaking only of disorientation and a fortunate self-rescue. In the weeks that followed, recovering from the physical and mental toll, Silas Thorne occupied my thoughts frequently. Had I acted rightly, preserving his fierce solitude? A part of me wrestled with the denial of closure for those who might still mourn him. Yet a larger, more resonant part acknowledged the truth of his transformation, his choice. The forest had irrevocably altered him, just as it had, in the crucible of a single night, left its indelible mark on me. I never ventured back into those particular woods, the allure of wildlife photography strangely extinguished. But sometimes, when the night is deep and the wind sighs through the unseen branches outside my window, I picture Silas out there in his sovereign wilderness, and I find myself questioning which of us remains truly civilized and which has found a harsher, perhaps purer form of freedom. The memory still surfaces, unbidden, sharp-edged, that first Thursday night, the clock hands creeping towards 9, when the request first breached the lobby's quietude. I was adrift behind the front desk, anchored only by the ledger's dry figures, the counter cool beneath my forearms. He materialized from the damp evening air, his gaze sweeping the space, assessing before drifting towards me. His attire, rumpled from travel, clung loosely. A compact valise bulged beside him, threatening its clasps. He required lodging, yes, but his need was specific, sharp as a pinprick. Room 813, only that. Patiently, I explained a hotel's modest verticality. 3 floors, our numbering concluding decisively at 310. No 8th story existed, no spectral 813. His eyes flickered towards the antiquated elevator cage, then back to me, a slow negation shaking his head. The number returned, spoken not with force, but with a low, unwavering insistence that seemed to absorb the ambient light. No reason offered, no query in his tone, just the number repeated. My fingers traced patterns on the keyboard, summoning the floor plan onto the monitor's sterile glow. Again, articulating clearly, I iterated the structural impossibility. He regarded the screen, unblinking for several heartbeats. A sigh escaped him then, a small surrender. Whatever space was free, he conceded, would suffice. I presented the key to 307. A murmured thanks, the shuffle of feet towards the lift, the clang and shudder as the old steel doors sealed him away. Disquiet lingered in their wake. The fixation on a non-existent chamber felt like a loose thread snagging at the fabric of the night. Initially, I dismissed it. The eccentricities of weary travelers are legion. I returned to the invoices, seeking refuge in their predictable columns. Yet for the remainder of my shift, each chime of the arriving elevator sent a jolt through me, a bracing expectation that he would reappear, his quiet insistence undimmed. 813. Later, when the night had deepened towards 2, the desk phone shrilled, an internal line. The console display illuminated 813, pixels burning an impossible truth. My pulse leapt, a frantic bird against my ribs. A glitch, I reasoned, a phantom signal in the hotel's aging nervous system. The ringing persisted. I lifted the receiver. Only static answered, a dry, empty hiss like wind across sand. No voice, no breath, just the sound of void. Hello? I ventured twice. Silence stretched, then fractured with a distinct click. The line died. Replacing the receiver, a glacial touch traced my spine. I chafed my arms against the sudden chill, whispering reassurances about faulty wiring, crossed signals, plausible deniability against the tremor in my hands. The display had shown 813. That image just seared itself behind my eyelids. I watched the silent phone, half expecting its renewed cry. Around 3, restlessness propelled me into my nightly patrol. The lobby, hushed and shadowed, required little tending. I checked the lounge, ensured the main entrance was secured from within, then rode the elevator's gentle ascent to the second floor. A routine inspection of the corridors, a balm for frayed nerves. Silence reigned, my footfalls muffled by the worn carpet, a soft rhythm in the stillness. Room 203, 204, 205 slid past, all tranquil. Near the elevator bank, I paused, glancing through the window at the streetlights painting the vacant asphalt below. That's when I perceived it, an anomalous glow staining the far end of the hallway. Too focused, too bright to be mere reflection. A knot tightened in my gut as I moved towards it, anticipating a sputtering bulb. Closer now, the light resolved itself, emanating from around something. A door, where no door belonged. The final room on this wing was 210, yet I stood before a solid paneled door, modern in design, bearing brass numerals that gleamed unnaturally. 813. I froze, breath caught, palms slick with sudden sweat. My own heartbeat hammered a frantic tattoo in my ears. Hesitantly, compelled, I advanced, squinting. The number was undeniable. The door itself seemed newer, smoother, its handle possessing a contemporary sheen absent elsewhere. Curiosity warred with instinct, pulling me forward. My fingers stretched out, brushing the doorknob. Ice cold. A low, electric hum vibrated faintly through the metal, resonating in my bones. My head pulsed. I blinked hard, shaking away the dizziness. The overhead lights flickered once, violently. When my vision cleared, the door was gone, vanished. Only blank, patterned wallpaper stretched before me, mocking my outstretched hand, which grasped only empty air. A ragged exhale escaped me. I retreated, legs unsteady. Exhaustion, I told myself. Hallucination born of fatigue. Yet the tactile memory of cold metal lingered, undeniable. The remainder of the shift passed in a blur of forced normalcy, the phantom door haunting the periphery of my thoughts. I returned to the lobby's relative sanctuary, eyes repeatedly drawn to the silent telephone. The traveler from 307 remained sequestered above. Morning brought him back to the desk, ready for checkouts. He presented his key, then inquired about extending his stay. Availability confirmed, he nodded slowly. And then the quiet question returned, unchanged. Was 803 perhaps free now? No, I managed, keeping my voice steady. That room does not exist here. A beat of silence hung between us. He accepted his current room for another night, offering no further word, no hint of explanation. I yearned to ask about the phantom call, about strange occurrences, but his gaze stopped me. Flat, detached, utterly devoid of warmth or inquiry. As if he already possessed answers I hadn't yet conceived questions for. That evening, dread was my unwelcome companion as I began my shift. Taking over from the day manager near 7, I donned a mask of professional calm. Lobby surveillance, guest greetings, the mundane rituals of the night desk. By 10, solitude settled in, broken only by the night bellhop's occasional snores from the staff room. Around 11, the internal line rang. The display flared 813. My heart constricted. I stared, paralyzed, until the third ring compelled my hand. Static hissed, a soft, sibilant sigh in my ear. My hesitant hello met only emptiness. Then the click. Disconnection. Investigation became imperative. Perhaps the phone in 307 was malfunctioning, misreporting its extension. The occupancy list confirmed the traveler remained. Master key in hand, I ascended. The corridor lights flickered erratically, a familiar symptom of the hotel's ancient wiring, straight to 307. My knock echoed. After a moment, the door opened partway. He regarded me, silent. Had he attempted to call the desk? No. Was his phone operational? He hadn't used it. A shrug. Could I test it? He stepped aside wordlessly. Inside, I lifted the receiver. Dial tone hummed normally. I pressed the front desk extension. Downstairs, my own desk phone began to ring. I hung up. Everything appeared functional. He offered no comment, his calm, unreadable stare following my movements. I thanked him and retreated. Back in the lobby's relative safety, I accessed the phone system logs behind the desk. The small panel displayed incoming internal calls, stark black digits on a pale screen, 2 calls logged since my shift began, both originating from extension 813. No record whatsoever from 307. The chill returned, deeper this time. Closing the panel, my gaze fell upon the short corridor leading to the rear service exit. It seemed longer, impossibly so. The 20 feet I knew stretched towards 40, 50, the light at its distant end flickering like a dying star. Fighting the instinct to flee, I took tentative steps towards it. A high-pitched whine began in my ears. My mouth turned to dust. Nearing the end, where only a fire extinguisher should hang, another door materialized on the right wall. Identical brass numerals, 813, the same disconcerting newness. I halted, breath catching, heart battering my ribs. A glance back confirmed my solitude. Reaching out, the knob met my touch with its familiar icy bite. Solid, real. I tried the handle, locked. Standing there, pulse roaring, I heard the distant, muffled ring of the desk phone. The corridor lights stuttered. I turned towards the sound. When I looked back, the door had dissolved. The corridor snapped back to its proper dimensions. I stumbled back to the desk, gasping, the phone now silent. Throughout that night, the hotel's geometry seemed unstable. The lobby floor might tilt imperceptibly. A doorway on the second floor would appear shifted inches to the left. A blink, and normalcy was restored. Nausea churned within me. Restless, slick with a cold sweat, I tried to lose myself in paperwork, but my eyes kept straying to the phone, waiting. It remained silent until dawn. The following day, near noon, the traveler appeared. Fatigue shadowed his face, dark crescents beneath his eyes. Checking out, he said. He settled his account, returned the key. The question burned on my tongue, about 813, about the calls, the strangeness. Something in his weary stillness held me back. He met my gaze for a long moment, then turned and walked, valise in hand, out through the glass doors and into the daylight. That evening, a fragile hope surfaced. Perhaps his departure had broken the cycle. Around 10, a headache began to bloom behind my temples. Pacing the lobby for distraction, the phone rang. Extension 813. A surge of adrenaline, hot and sharp. I snatched the receiver. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice tight. Static answered, thicker this time. Then beneath it, a whisper distorted, like words strained through layers of wet cloth. Unintelligible. A pause. The click. Dead air. Slamming the phone down, resolve hardened within me. I would scour every floor, document every room number, prove to myself the non-existence of 813. Elevator to the third floor. Up and down the corridor. 301, 302, 303, all present accounted for. Second floor, same methodical pace. All seemed ordinary. Standing near the elevator again, the worn carpet yielding slightly underfoot, the lights buzzing faintly overhead. And then, at the corridor's farthest reach, 813. This time, I marched towards it, fueled by a mixture of terror and determination. My heart hammered, lips trembling. The door felt utterly solid. Master key retrieved, I inserted it. The lock yielded with a soft snick. I pushed. The door held fast, resisting as if blocked from within. I leaned my shoulder into it, rattling the handle. A loud thump echoed from the other side, heavy, final, like furniture overturning. My blood turned to ice water. I recoiled. The door slammed shut, seemingly of its own volition. The brass numerals flickered momentarily incandescent before the entire structure dissolved, leaving only the impassive wall. My legs trembled uncontrollably as I retreated to the elevator, jabbing the call button repeatedly. The descent felt agonizingly slow. Back in the lobby, lightheaded, shirt clinging damply, concentration became impossible. Every creak, every shadow amplified my unease. Around 4 a.m., I surrendered, sinking into the desk chair to simply wait for morning, unwilling to roam the shifting halls again. The calls persisted over the following nights, always from the same phantom extension. Sometimes the static, sometimes the muffled whisper. Sometimes I let it ring unanswered until silence fell. The door sightings continued, sporadic now, glimpsed at hallway ends, lurking in lobby corners, once even materializing near the exterior delivery bay. Always the same appearance, always resistant or vanishing before entry could be gained. Sometimes a blink erased it, other times it lingered, daring me to watch until a flicker of light reclaimed the space. I burrowed into the hotel's archives, unearthing faded blueprints, dusty maintenance logs, no 8th floor, no room 803. The building stood 3 stories, immutable on paper. The phone system manual contained no such extension. Logic offered no purchase. Trapped in this loop of dread and disbelief, quitting felt impossible, yet each night shift began with a fresh wave of anxiety. My manager dismissed my tentative explanations as stress, suggesting a vacation, but walking away felt like surrender. I had to understand. Gradually, the phenomena ebbed. The calls dwindled to 1 a night, then ceased altogether. The door appeared less frequently, a fleeting anomaly at the edge of vision, gone before I could fully focus. After 2 months of relative peace, a semblance of normalcy returned. I began to convince myself it was over. A strange fever dream induced by long hours and isolation. Then, one quiet night, deep into the shift, immersed in handover notes, the lobby still and empty, that familiar glacial prickle touched the back of my neck. Slowly, I turned. There, directly behind the front desk, where the manager's solid office door should have been, stood 813. Its paint looked fresh, dark, the modern handle gleaming under the fluorescent lights. My heart seized, threatening to crack my ribs. Run! The thought screamed, but my feet were leaden, drawn towards it. Palms sweating, I approached. My hand rested on the knob, cold, familiar. With infinite slowness, I turned it. The door opened inward, perhaps an inch. The low, electric hum emanated from the darkness within. I leaned closer, peering into the oppressive black, a wave of nausea washing over me. Suddenly, the door slammed shut with violent force, narrowly missing my fingers. I leaped back. A heartbeat later, the manager's familiar oak door stood in its place, nameplate firmly affixed. I stood there, gasping, heart racing, body trembling. The phone remained silent. Backing away slowly, my mind churned, finding no anchor. Whatever resided behind, within, or as room 818, it defied understanding. It manifested, it called, it vanished, offering no purpose, no reason. I still work the night shift. I move through the routines, check-ins, calls, patrols. Sometimes a flicker in my peripheral vision, a hint of dark wood and brass numerals down a hall, by a stairwell. When I turn to look directly, it's always gone. I don't speak of it anymore. Who would believe? But I know what I saw, what I continue to glimpse, and every time the phone rings, in the dead hours, my hand hovers, trembling, before I answer, because the call might be from a room that isn't there. And maybe, just maybe, one night the knob will turn all the way, and the thought of what lies beyond that threshold is a colder dread than any I have known.